I was living in Las Vegas and I was going through a divorce with my husband of 13 years, and I was really messed up. And I had been beaten and choked unconscious for more than a decade on a regular basis, and I was having seizures. And in my attempt to save my marriage, I had begun psychiatric treatment, hoping I was the problem, because if I was the problem, I could fix that. And I ended up on all these crazy pills, and I was just a very broken and traumatized person with a lot of health issues. When I left him, I was morbidly obese. My hair was falling out. I walked out of a $500,000 house and left with nothing. And after 13 years of marriage, I got nothing in the way of a settlement. The judge did give me my car, but I literally walked away seriously damaged and no recourse, no resources, no ability to start over. Immediately after I left my husband, I was in the shelter, and then I was homeless for 9 months. I had family here in Texas that I could stay with, but he filed paperwork that brought me back to this other state where I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to stay. Anyway, I did eventually get a place to stay, and I had a car to drive, and it was a crazy deal with the vehicle. My ex did everything he could to leave me without a vehicle, knowing that in Vegas, if you are foot on pavement homeless as a woman, you will most likely be killed, or you will, be pimped out and sold. I was not in any shape to be sold for sex. So I was, gonna be killed. And he knew it. So he fought tooth and nail about the car. God did give me the car, and it was a crazy series of miraculous things that led to that. But anyway, I ended up in a condominium, and I had a vehicle, and I was just trying to be of service to the Lord. And I started working with these women who had just come out of prison or rehab. I was not, I did not have a fancy title. I didn't go through the background checks and the hiring procedures. I was just a volunteer. And what I was doing for this organization called We Care is I would take the girls to their appointments. So I would just give them a ride. Some of them, could ride the bus. Some of them, that really wasn't a great idea. They might be hiding from a pimp, or, be especially traumatized, or have some kind of physical or mental or emotional impairment that made it to where riding public transit was not a good idea. And there was this one woman that I began to, give rides to, who had been gang raped by 3 men, and they had hit her in the head with a steel pipe and cracked her skull open. She had been a college student in California, and she had come to Vegas just for the weekend. And she was down on the main strip, Las Vegas Boulevard, at the 7-Eleven. Everybody knows this one particular 7-Eleven, and everybody's been there. And it's a very public place. It usually has no real crime, because of the fact that it's on the strip and it's a tourist town. So, they want to, keep tourism, and they can't do that if people are being, killed on the strip in Las Vegas. And so, anyway, it's usually considered a very safe place. But anyway, she was there, and a guy walked up to her seeming to ask for directions. And while she was explaining to him that she didn't know and she wasn't from there, in her peripheral vision, she could see 2 other guys walk up behind her on each side. And one of them hit her in the back of the head with the steel pipe. Like I mentioned a moment ago, it did crack her skull open, and they dragged her to the back of the building. There were witnesses, there were people who were watching this, and no one called the police and no one got involved. There were cameras, and no one did anything. These guys took turns on what they believed to be a dead body, and when they were done with her, they just left. And still, no one called the police until the morning manager for the day shift came in, and he thought he was just calling to have a dead body cleared away that he had found behind the building. But when the authorities arrived, one of the workers found a pulse, and they got her to the hospital, and they did surgery on her brain, and they were able to save her. But she was in a coma for a long time, like 4 months. And when she wakes up, she's pregnant. And she still had to stay in the hospital for a couple months. And so by the time I meet her, she's like 7 months pregnant. And, you know, what she tells me, all she knows about me upon meeting me, is that my name is Victoria and that I love Jesus. And I just want to know how I can serve her. What can I do to be of assistance to her? Where does she need to go? Is she hungry? These kinds of things. And so the first thing she tells me is, I'm gonna have an abortion, and there's nothing you can say that's gonna stop me. And she said, you should know. You should know I'm gonna have an abortion. It was like the statement she was saying. It was like she was saying, before you do anything to help me, you should know that I'm about to do something that you're gonna hate, and that you might decide to hate me for. But having been from the background that I'm from, and certainly being one who has contemplated terminating a pregnancy before, I had no judgments. And I myself have been gang raped and thrown out for dead by men, and by the grace of God, I did not get pregnant or get any kind of disease, and I did not succumb to my injuries. But I remember being terrified at the thought, what if one of these guys gave me a disease and I'm ruined and I can never have another relationship? What if I'm pregnant with the baby of one of these monsters, And and even though when I had gotten pregnant, at this point in my life, I'd been pregnant twice. Both were men that I cared about. Both were men that I voluntarily had sex with. Neither time was giving birth in my best interest. On both occasions, it was going to hinder my life and quite possibly destroy it for me to go through with the pregnancy. So I had no judgments against this woman at all. And I think that my response was not expected. So I stood there listening to her statement, and in my heart just had no judgments. And all I could say to her was, I don't blame you. I can't say that I would do anything different. I understand why you would want to terminate this pregnancy and move on with your life. You must just want to get it all behind you. And I just saw the complete demeanor of her face change. The furrowing in her brows disappeared, and the tension in her shoulders, it just relaxed. And it looked like the weight of the world had just been lifted off this girl. And I reached out and I put my hand on her and I said, I would like to be your friend. and I don't want to see you have to get on the city bus after having a late-term abortion. Would it be okay if I went with you and just held your hand and gave you a ride? And she said, yeah, that would be good. I would appreciate that. And so we began our relationship. That day, she had a series of different appointments, and we ran around to do some various things. And we got some big sodas, and we rode with the music up and the windows down. And we just spent time together and accomplished everything that we needed to on her list for that day. Because it was a late-term abortion, it was requiring a specific appointment that, was not right away. It was a number of weeks. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks away, and we were seeing each other every day. And one day, very close to the appointment where she was terminating her pregnancy, the Lord just moved in my heart and began to speak through me. And by this point, we had built a bond. And one thing that she knew for sure is that I loved her and that I had no agenda. I was not her friend to advance my own interest. And then one day, it was like the day before, or maybe 48 hours before she was scheduled to terminate this baby, the Lord just spoke through me, and I said, what if the abortion doesn't make things better? What if instead of terminating, the pregnancy, making things feel better, what if it makes it worse? And I'm just thinking, you're already so far along. What if something good could come out of this? There's a lot of people that are praying so hard for a baby, and for whatever reason they can't do it on their own. What if we could find someone who wanted to adopt this baby, and you could still move on with your life, and it would still be something that you could put behind you? But what if you just had like the comfort and the peace of knowing that you were able to do something good and place this baby in a home where they would be loved and cherished? What if you could be the answer to someone's prayer? And there was just a really long silence. And she said, I don't even know how I would, go about something like that. And I said, well, I've placed a child for adoption, and there's different types of agencies. One kind of agency is, for the wealthy and the privileged, and they have a lot of questions. And there's a lot of hoops that a birth mother has to go through. But there's also agencies that work with people that can't get a child through the regular traditional agencies. And they're like, women that are unmarried, they're like career women, and they have money, but they don't, have a husband, and so the traditional adoption agencies won't place a child with them. Or there may be some other, kind of issue. But these kinds of agencies, they don't ask any questions. You don't have to tell them who the father is. They don't want your past medical history unless you just want to give it. They make it very, very easy for you. And they understand, they don't even care if the baby's got, health problems. These are people who they just want a baby. And she was like, yeah, that might be okay. I mean, how do we get a hold of someone like that? And so we looked up the number to an agency, and we called them, and we told them, what the situation was. And I forgot to tell you, all she knew about the men who attacked her is that it was a white guy, a black guy, and an Asian guy. So we go through all of the process, and she decides on this one woman who is a photographer for Rolling Stone magazine. And she's a beautiful Asian woman, very successful, but she traveled a lot, and her job, required her to put in a lot of hours, and she, just could not sustain a romantic relationship. And she really wanted a child, and she had the money to bring the child with her to all these amazing places all around the world, with a nanny, and to school the child, educate the child herself, with hired teachers and educators that could be accommodating to her schedule. And no, none of the traditional agencies wanted any part of placing a child with this woman. And so this was what she decided on. But the day that she went into labor, the lady from Rolling Stone magazine flew out and was at the hospital before the baby was born. And the plan was, because I had told her, I said, look, I don't know if you want to hold your baby and say goodbye. I kept my baby for 18 months, maybe 20 months, and it made it a lot harder. So I don't know, but you probably want to think about that, like what's going to make it easiest for you. And she decided that she did not want to hold the baby, that she wanted the adoptive mother to be in the room when the baby was born, so that as soon as the baby was born, they could hand the baby over to the adoptive mother, not to her. And that is what happened. When the baby was born, because of course we didn't know who the father was, if it was the black guy, the white guy, or the Asian guy. And the Asian woman who was adopting the baby didn't care. She did not care about the race of the baby. And the baby was born, and the baby was Asian. And it just seemed so divinely arranged. And when this woman was attacked, one of the things that was so hard, this young girl, was how this entire city and community worked together to keep what happened to her a secret. Because it was a tourist town, nobody wanted this to get out. And, her head was shaved because she had to have brain surgery. And, she had been a student in California and had come just for the weekend. And her car had been towed, and it was already sold off before she woke up in the hospital. And her apartment back in California, because she hadn't been there to pay the rent, they were able to evict basically on abandonment of the property, and they put all of her stuff out on the curb. So all of her childhood pictures and everything that she had in that apartment was gone. So when she woke up in the hospital, she didn't have anything. She had nowhere to go back to. The college had dropped her as an active student, which had revoked her scholarship. And so she had, nothing and no real, bearings on how to even begin again. And so, anyway, the arrangement with the adoption agency was just very bare minimum. She was going to get some counseling and, you know, that kind of thing. But this Asian lady was so grateful to this woman who had been assaulted for doing the adoption, that she actually relocated this girl back to California, which is very expensive in California, crazy money to get rent and everything handled there, and bought her another car and paid for her tuition at college for, I think, 2 years. And, got her above and beyond what had been required as far as, really good therapy, and sent her to a doctor to help all of her hormones and everything because, there's a big hormone shift that affects you cognitively and emotionally after you give birth. And that's going to happen even after an abortion. When you go from being pregnant to not pregnant, postpartum happens, and a lot of women that terminate don't foresee that as being an issue. They think they're just going to go back to normal. That's not the case. But anyway, this Asian woman, was so grateful, and she would send her letters. And eventually she started to, after, of course, making sure it was okay, she started sending pictures. And this girl got to see her baby, living this amazing life. And it was beautiful. And she sent me a letter about 2 years after she had gone back to California, and her hair was all grown out. I had not seen her with hair before. And I also had not really seen her not pregnant. I saw her right after she gave birth, but she had, gotten back to working out, and her hair had grown out. And I mean, she just looked fall out of a magazine gorgeous. She had this long, curly, really deep, beautiful red hair and these just flaming green eyes, and she had gotten engaged, and she had gotten her degree, and like all these amazing things, and she had just been walking in the beautiful, abundant blessings of God. I mean, God had just lavished on this woman, and she was really glad that she had gone the route that she had, and I'm not sure what all unfolded with her spiritual walk, but she was able to see a reflection of God in a very broken, messed up woman like me. And had I not been able to relate, had I been some privileged church lady who spoke in absolutes and who said things like, oh, I would never murder an innocent child in my womb. You know what I'm saying? Like if she had encountered some pompous, privileged woman who's never been faced with the kind of circumstances that might cause her to consider abortion an option, God was able to reach this woman through my pain. And he was able to use my past to help me connect with her and relate to her. And I remember us talking about the gang rape, and I told her, no, I haven't been hit in the head with the pipe and left behind a convenience store for dead. But, I was gang raped. And they threw me out of a truck doing 60 miles an hour like a bag of trash. And I don't think they expected me to live. So, yeah, God will use our deepest pain to help someone. And God will use people that the world sees as the most unlikely because of who he is reaching through that person's testimony. And we see this in Scripture. And there was some debate in the early church about the way that God used Paul. You know, he would eat with Gentiles and he would eat pork. And he would go to these events that Jews did not deem appropriate, you know. But being in the mix of all this enabled him to preach the gospel to an audience that otherwise would not have listened. You know, he was able to relate. You know, Paul was a Jew and he was also a Roman citizen. And God used him, his ability to debate and converse with the Pharisees and also the Gentiles.